All right, well, welcome everyone to today's Process Optimization Academy session. And what we're focused on is what I think is one of the most impactful capabilities of the solution, which is finding definitions that are meant to help discover and monitor process inefficiencies. But before we get to them, we have to get the Academy logistics out of the way, especially for our newcomers and for those of you that are watching the recorded version of this session. So the purpose of these sessions are to help us all get better educated on ServiceNow's in-platform process mining capabilities. So we'll provide how-tos, practical guidance and use cases, different product updates. And as a group, we're simply here just to exchange ideas and collaborate so we all continue to get better as it pertains to process mining on the ServiceNow platform. So how these sessions will work, we'll have a scheduled topic that we'll cover for usually the first 30 minutes. Today's will fall into that time bucket, I think. And we'll be diving into finding definitions. Then we'll open it up for questions on the chosen topic for that session. Then we'll open it up for questions above and beyond today's topic, sort of like an office hours session. So if you're watching the recording and you're playing around with process optimization on the platform, you got a question, pop on back over here for the next session, and we'll try to get it answered or post it on the community site, and we'll get it answered usually within 24 hours. So these sessions are going to be recorded and eventually posted on the community. So if that's a no-no for you at your company, consider yourself warned. And then finally, feel free to post your questions during the session in the chat. Often during these sessions, I'll pause and open it up for folks to ask questions when it makes sense. Other times, as those of you that have been here before, you'll notice I like to ramble for a bit, and then eventually I'll go back and check the chat at the end to get the questions answered and addressed. You should all be on mute when you come in. So if we do pause and ask for questions, just make sure you unmute yourself so you're not sitting there talking to yourself, asking a question and wondering why we're not answering or responding to you. And then in the situations when they do come up and I don't, or there's other folks on the phone, we don't have an answer for your question immediately, we'll follow up and either post the answer to the process optimization community forum, or maybe if it's a big enough topic, we'll use it for a future session. That's a reminder for all of you. If you have ideas for future sessions, please put them in the chat or post them to the community site so we can start building up a backlog or a list of future sessions here. This is the slide that says anything I say and do here today cannot be held against me in the court of law. It's also the slide that says, as part of these conversations, if we make any forward-looking statement about what may be coming in future releases, you should take them as such, make no decisions based on those statements, because things are always subject to change in this world that we live in. And I'm sure at this point you've now all read the fine print. For those that this is the first time, or you might be watching on the recording, just an introduction of myself. My name is Dan Grady. I'm currently a product manager for our process optimization solution, but I've been at ServiceNow for about 6 years. And that entire time been focused on our now intelligence solutions. So things like performance analytics, predictive intelligence, the virtual agent, as well as our low-code solutions like our App Engine Studio. All right, so today's agenda, what we're going to be talking about, as always, do that quick 2-minute process mining refresher, kind of like a process mining 101 for folks. Then we'll dive into the topic for today, which is finding definitions. We'll get your questions answered. We'll talk a little bit about how to get started and some additional resources. There's some new resources that were recently released that I want to make you all aware of. And then we'll talk about the future sessions that are coming up. All right, so quick refresher. For those that are newcomers. With everything we do, there's a design and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out, whether it's planning a session like these Process Optimization Academy sessions or a business process. And when you design things, you design typically for both efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for everyone. Unfortunately, though, what we design is not always what happens in reality. What in-platform process mining or process optimization allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given workflow on the ServiceNow platform to create a visual representation of what is actually happening within our given processes. And this new level of visibility helps us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies and improvement opportunities within those processes. So process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been super challenging for us to answer on the platform with, let's say, reporting or traditional analytics on the platform. So if you think about it, traditional analytics will allow us to answer a lot of the what questions about our process. Right? Process mining helps us answer the why. So things like, where is our process stuck? Where is the rework happening? Where are tickets ping-ponging between groups? Or where aren't we conforming to the process that we designed at the very beginning? And my favorite one, I always like to call this one the customers ask for, the finger pointing, right? Who's holding on to the tickets the longest? If you're a more optimistic person, you probably call that the opportunity to improve report. These are all things that customers have always come to us from a ServiceNow perspective and wanted to answer, but they've been a little bit of a challenge or difficult to answer, and even more importantly, more difficult to act upon. And now the answers to those questions are available in a couple of clicks. We like to say that process optimization is going to get you to the why behind all of your KPIs. All right, now for today's topic. The visualized process map is typically what gets everyone's attention when they first see process optimization. And in my opinion, it sometimes causes people to overlook the fact that they can simply surface opportunities to improve without ever even going to the map, or maybe surface opportunities before we even go to the map is probably a better way. So if they start using finding definitions. It's like, yeah, the calculator makes doing math homework super easy, but you know what? Just using the answer key makes it even easier, is kind of what I like to think about when I'm starting to think about what finding definitions are. So, or what they can do for us. So what are they? They're preset rules that you can apply to a set of records that you're mining. They basically bucket and highlight non-conformant or inefficient activities. So things like multi-hop issues or processes that are bypassing steps can be highlighted right up front on the summary and insights page for a given project. So before a process owner or analyst even views the map, they can start seeing, hey, here are some things within your process you might want to pay attention to. Some of you may have heard me use this analogy before, or say this before, but a lot of analytic solutions are designed to give people the ability to sift through the haystack to find those needles of opportunity. But I mean, the reality is if we could just get rid of the hay and show people the needles, of course we'd do that, right? Finding definitions allow us to start removing some of the hay right up front for our process owners and other stakeholders. So what we do is we provide some pre-built finding definitions across ITSM, CSM, and HR via something we call content packs to get you started. But then you'll have the ability to adjust the out-of-the-box ones that we provide and create your own to test and prove hypotheses or monitor whether processes are conforming over time. Once you make, let's say, an improvement or a change, you want to start seeing, hey, is this situation popping back up? You can use these finding cards to start seeing that. So just something to think about when, many of you are probably just starting out with your process mining exercises at your organization. It's always good to kind of discuss with your process owners ahead of time where they think inefficiencies exist. And if possible, create finding definitions to align to those things. Like just ask your process, you have 2 or 3 ideas of where inefficiencies exist in process. Most likely they do. And then create finding cards for those. It's just going to make the experience they have the first time they come into process optimization that much better, because maybe, oh my gosh, you've solved my problem, or at least shown a light on the problem that I thought I had here, and directly get them to some insights. Just to give you an example of a content pack, this is the kind of the ITSM content pack that we provide. It comes with 13 finding definitions packaged up inside of there to get you to started. And if we look at some of the 13 that come out of the box, we have things like incidents moving to on hold state 2 or more times, or incidents that have had their resolution rejected more than 1 time, or incidents that are going directly to resolved and then can close. It's actually, I think someone on the call here was involved in this, had this use case just the other day. where on an office hours call, it was brought up. They were looking for the percentage of incidents that met this condition of going directly to resolved and closed, and we were able to potentially use a finding card to kind of show them the answer to that question. And then, of course, obviously, the multi-hop issue is one that most of you ask about, or a lot of customers are very interested in analyzing. So those base finding definitions for a given process, like those 13 that we provide on the ITSM side, those are stored in a process configuration record. So you can get to these process configuration records in the process optimization module in the left-hand nav. You either have to be a process optimization admin or power user to configure these. Prior to Tokyo, you can create finding definitions at only the process, or we'll say table level, let's say like incident, meaning that all finding definitions will be applied to any mining project that goes against that table or hits that table. Now in Tokyo, if you were on the last call, you saw this, but just as a reminder for people that are new, in Tokyo, we added the ability to create project level finding definitions to be applied in addition to those process level ones. So you can start, hey, here's the foundational ones that we want to apply across all mining that happens on this table, but then individual, let's say, process owners or analysts can apply their or create their own finding rules or finding definitions at the process level. And we'll look at that a little bit when we get into the instance itself. So finding definitions themselves, they're made up of a sequence of rules. So we'll go into the instance and look at this at a few of these, but essentially what you do is you configure a starting step, like, hey, this thing happens, then you configure the next thing, then something else happens. And you can put in some time qualifiers and add some additional constraints. And if you look at this example here on the screen, we are looking for records where an approval was requested, then approved by the same person. That's usually not something that we're cool with, right? If you're not really getting the check and balance system, if somebody that's requesting something is allowed to approve it on their own, but so you might want to call those out if those are actually happening in your process. So you can set that up. You can see either your start condition, your end condition, and then that relation constraint on the right-hand side performed by the same user. I put these slides in here kind of as a reference. I'm not going to go through line by line, but just kind of some examples of the conditional logic that you can use and set up when you start setting up your finding rules, and kind of just as a reference piece here. And some of these condition types are available now. And then I kind of starred the ones that are new in Tokyo, because we did do some work in Tokyo to improve the complexity of the finding rules that you can create as you're going through this. So here's some of the predicate logic that's easy for me to say that you can add some occurrences. So there's the idea that, hey, this condition, I only care if it gets, I want to start this when it hits that state for the first time, or maybe it's the last time that it hits that state that you want to set it up. So you can add some occurrence matching logic there. And then some of the constraints on the right-hand side. So from a time perspective, or potentially, we'll create one in a little bit in which we say, hey, I want to look at when this is in the work in progress to resolved bucket for the same group, assignment group for more than 36 hours. We're interested in those, let's say. The other thing to call out here is when you're creating your finding rules, you have the ability to start stacking them. So you may have more complex scenarios where you need to start stacking a sequence of events. For example, you may be interested, and we talked about this one earlier, right? There may be instancing records that go directly from start of the process to resolved, and then immediately after resolved, they go directly to the closed state. So that would be a scenario where you'd want to set up, you need to set up sequencing of two finding rules stacked on top of each other. Now, last thing before we get into the instance and look at these, I put this in here as a reminder for me because it's something that I typically forget. And if I wasn't already bald, this is the type of thing that would cause me to lose my hair. So it's important to remember that finding rules are based on the data we're mining from the audit logs, right? So the data that we're pulling from the audit table is based on things that we configure in the model. Specifically, we're interested here in the activities we configure for a model. So if the data isn't in an activity record or an activity value that you set up, you're not going to be able to apply a finding rule to it. So let's say, for example, this is kind of so far what you've seen in a lot of the examples, you've seen that we focused on states or approvals. These are typically things that we have activities for. So if you remember what an activity is, those are the different kind of like nodes and transitions that you're seeing. We've very often looked at setting up an assignment group and state as an activity. So those are typically what you're going to be building your finding rules against. If you don't have an activity for something, you can't really apply a finding rule to it. So it's important, if you're trying to configure a finding rule, you set it up, then you go over and you mine the data and you're sure, like I know I have records that meet this criteria, they're not showing up in the finding rule. It's typically because you haven't set up an activity to make sure the appropriate data is available for you. All right, enough slides. Let's jump over to the instance and take a look at some of these things in action. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'm just going to pause and see if any questions came up in the chat.
There's one question, Dan, about
yeah, sure.
What is going to be available in both San Diego and ITSM standard license, and if you can comment on that.
Sure, definitely. So what we're looking at here today, and everything that I've kind of talked about so far, with the few exceptions that I called out, are San Diego based. And a lot of that stuff is already available even from the Rome release. From a kind of a licensing perspective, so process optimization is available as part of the enterprise offering. So it's not available from an ITSM standard perspective. You need to kind of get to the enterprise level. And remember the safe harbor slide. But if you're at the pro level, you should read content and you're interested in process optimization, just work with your account team, because we're working to add a little bit more flexibility for customers that are at the pro level to start taking advantage of this capability. So work with your account team if you're interested in what you see here today and you're already at the pro level. All right, so let's take a look at some of these in action. I'm going to come over here to this project that I've mined, and you'll notice we talked about this already, but I'm going to get to the summary and insights page, and this is where we're going to start surfacing those finding definitions. They're bucketed on the summary and insights page underneath the improvement opportunities section. So you'll start seeing some things like this culture of bad cleanup, right? Records that take longer than 7 days, to go from resolved to closed. And this is an example that with customers, they have different customers have different timeframes that they look at, whether it be 7 days or 5 days or whatever it might be. So this is the out of the box one. You may choose to adjust this finding rule, or something here where incidents took more than 12 hours between work in progress and resolved, and we'll go build one that looks like this. Maybe we'll make it 36 hours. Here's that one where incidents go directly to resolved to closed, and on any one of these cards here, you'll notice, so I've bucketed, of the 22,000 records that we mined, or incidents that we mined here, 13% of them met this condition. They go directly to resolved and closed. And I can, right from here, get to the map of just that 13% of the record. So it's kind of like, hey, finding card, shone a light on the fact that this condition or this inefficiency or non-conformance is happening. And now I want to get directly to focus in on those scenarios when that happens. And you'll see my map is focused in just on that path: start, resolved, closed. And we can start looking at other metrics on top of this. But more importantly, typically when you use these finding cards and you isolate a certain flow, that's where the breakdowns start coming in, really come into play from an analysis perspective, where you can start saying, hey, which assignment groups are involved in these incidents, these 13% of these incidents, right? Which are the biggest contributors to that? Or maybe which category of incidents or service are the ones in which we're seeing this happen most often. So we can focus in on, let's say, a category and see that, hey, about 1.9 or 8% of them are hitting that, or coming from the IT business service group. And I want to focus in on just those and apply that filter and narrow it down. So it's, the finding card is really a great starting point for a lot of the analysis that you're doing, especially if you work with your process owners up front to get their hypotheses about common things that happen in their processes, or things that they think are happening and they're just having a hard time proving them. We also got our multi-hop issue one here, which is a very common one. And then if I come over here, another one that is super helpful. is this one in which solutions get rejected, right? Incidents resolution rejected by customer more than one time. And if I just open this one up, you'll start to see on the map that'll take me to just those. And there's big, thick lines going back between resolved and in progress to start analyzing. And again, using our breakdowns, we can start seeing which types of tickets are the ones in which we have an area that can improve the quality of the work that we're doing. So that's kind of how you visualize from a process owner perspective and start using them from an analysis standpoint. But let's go in and look at kind of how behind the scenes, how these get configured. As I mentioned in the slides, what we've got, I'll come over here to my left-hand nav. These in San Diego, you configure these at the process level, and they're stored, the finding rules are stored in your process configurations here. So I've got 3 process configurations right now, one for change request, one for the incident table, and one for the SN customer service case table. And if I open up the incident one, this is one of those ones that comes in the content pack. So if you turn the content pack on, you're going to have this process configuration record set up for you. This process configuration record controls kind of the auto root cause analysis that we do, the automation discovery configuration, as well as your clustering configuration for that table. So when you run some mining against, let's say, the incident table in this case, and you do the cluster analysis, all the configuration for that is kind of stored, or mapped, I should say, is probably a better way, mapped to from this process configuration record. In addition, this is where you find your finding definitions here. So if we start looking at, let's say, that one that we were just focused on, the solution rejection issue, I'm going to open up that finding definition. You'll see you have the ability to categorize these. Out of the box, we have categories for quality, conformance, and performance. You can certainly create your own categories to start just organizing and filtering your finding definitions that you have out there. They'll give it a name. And then you start setting up the individual rules that will be involved. In this case here, if I open up this rule, I'll just open the record, you'll see, right, we're looking at incident resolution record, the ones that have come back. So the first start condition is the state was resolved. And then after resolved, eventually followed by, so you can set these up to be followed by, eventually followed by, not followed by, or not eventually followed by. So at any point after the state was resolved, if the incident state goes back to work in progress, I want to capture that record and bucket it into that finding card that's going to show up in the summary and insights page. So it just gets you it's a really powerful way to get down to a level of granularity when you're doing some analysis that you just don't have anywhere else on the platform. Maybe we want to look at that one that's going from resolve to close, because that's a multi-step one. So let's see, process step missed, I think. Yep, let's open this one up. And you'll see we've stacked these now. So the first one in the sequence, if I open it up, is going to have, hey, state is new or process start. So this is an example of a start condition. You have the ability to create or condition. So it's, I want to start capturing these records or the start point if it was state is new or directly at the beginning of the process. So you can set up or conditions. And then if it was eventually followed by the state is resolved, great. So I'll capture all those records that go directly from new or start to resolved. And then in addition to that, I want to say, well, it's got to go immediately from the resolved state to the closed state. So just the ones that go from start to resolved and then immediately from resolved to close. So you can start stacking these conditions to create a very complex scenario or a very specific scenario that you want to start bucketing in a finding rule. And then the last one here that we'll look at is that multi-hop issue one, because this has got uses a unique kind of condition logic here. If we open it up, you'll see in this one here, my start condition is assignment group is anything. So any assignment group gets set on the record. And then if that's eventually followed by another assignment group getting set on the record, I want to capture those, right? So you can make these, if I created, you'll see when I go to create a rule in a second, you can make these very specific. So you can set up conditions where you only want to focus on assignment group A to assignment group B and maybe back to assignment group A, or you might just want to make it pretty generic and say anytime the assignment group changes more than once on a ticket, I want to bucket it here. So you've got the ability to make it specific or leave it a little bit more open-ended when you create these rules. All right, let's go and build one so you can see the process from the beginning. So I'm going to click on new here, and we'll build one that says, we'll build a rule that's around, let's say, a single assignment group holding on to a ticket or for more than 36 hours. So it moves to work in progress, it takes more than 36 hours for that same group to get it to resolve, we'll say. So we'll call this Academy today incident more than 36 hours, we'll say. And we'll bucket this in a performance category and we'll say submit. And now we'll build our finding rules. So we'll say new, we'll give it a sequence. Well, this is going to be the first step that we want to capture. And the start condition, you'll notice here on start conditions, you've got this library. As you create start conditions, there's going to be a whole bunch of them. So state is resolved, state is work in progress. You create these conditions and then you can reuse them over and over again. I'm going to just build a new one so you can see what goes into building a condition. So we probably already have the ones that I need out there, but let's just do one from the beginning. So the first thing that I want to capture is I want to start this process or start capturing records if they move into the work in progress state. So we'll say start at or in progress. We'll say start at in progress. And then when we set up our condition types right now, we can either set up a field value condition. We can do an or condition, which says, I want to combine two of these field value conditions together in my start or in this condition here. Or I can simply say, you know what, I just want to use the process start or the process end. So as soon as the record is created, I want to start, or as soon as the record is closed or moves to false, I want to end. So we're going to do a field value condition here, and we're going to say that the state, remember when you're creating these field value conditions, it has to be data that you're going to be capturing as part of an activity, a definition you set up. So we're going to say the state is, right, and here's where you can set up anything, like we saw before in that last example, but the state is, in this case, in progress. Okay. And then I've got this occurrences to match. So I can say, hey, I want to start this anytime it sees the in progress, but for the start, maybe the first time it moves to in progress, that's when I want to start this rule. Like the first time it hits in progress, that's where I'm going to start my counter. So we'll hit submit. And then I've got my relation. So do I want it to be followed by something, eventually followed by something, not followed by, or not eventually? So we're going to say, you know what, eventually, after it moves to in progress, eventually it's going to get to resolved. So I'm going to add a condition that says Academy resolved. I'm going to say today, just in case I've created this one before. Again, it's a field value condition, and we'll just say that the state is going to be resolved. Okay, and you know what? I want to make that the last time. So the last time in that audit trail, we see resolved, because you know what? If it gets reopened, I'm still going to want to count that in my 36 hours here, just for this use case. I don't know if that makes sense in your worlds, but just for this use case, let's say that. So I've got this. Anytime it moves to in progress and then is eventually followed by the last resolved, I want to start capturing those. But specifically here, I'm interested in ones that are, let's say, in between that time that it starts in progress and gets to the last resolved, that take 36 hours, right? That are longer than 36 hours. So I'll set my minimum duration to 36 hours. Actually, I should probably do this to be 1 day and 12 hours. If I had hit submit, it would automatically update that for me. But so now what we're saying here is, hey, if it lives between work in progress and resolved for more than 36 hours, I want to capture those. And let's just, for purposes of this exercise, let's add an additional constraint and say, you know what, I want all of that time to be, the ticket to be in the same group. So we'll say has the same assignment group the entire time that it's living in there. Great. And I'm tracking the duration of what's going on, and we'll hit submit. And now I've got that rule set up. Now, in order to not sit here and wait for the mining to take place, I kind of pre-ran this one in my Academy finding examples. So I'm going to come over here, and I think I already have this one set up inside of here. The result of that would be, hey, work in progress, same group for more than 36 hours. If I just wanted to look at that here, you'll see I've got this big in progress to resolved. And if I kind of came in here and put my average duration on that, just so you can see more than 2 days. So that's kind of where I'm starting to capture those records. So that's kind of just the process of creating your finding rules and the definitions themselves. I just wanted to walk you through that. So you got a sense. I believe that, you can get pretty creative with these. And I also believe that these are super powerful and kind of when you start getting into it, and you start really using process optimization, you're going to find that these are maybe even more valuable than the map itself, the visualized process map itself, for your process owners or stakeholders that are involved in the process. Just pause there and any questions that anybody has. Oh, and I see Jeroen has joined us. Any questions that we want to that came up as we went through that? We're good. It looks like I'm looking at the chat. It looks like Jeroen answered some of the questions in the chat, so that's good. Let's see. I'll just call them out just in case you're not monitoring the chat. What's the difference between followed by and eventually followed by? And Jeroen answered. Followed by is directly followed by, so it immediately happens after that that step. Whereas eventually followed by is, hey, just like the one we just set up. We said, hey, I want to start this when work in progress happened, and then eventually, somewhere along the way, after we set the state to work in progress, we hit a resolve state. It didn't have to be the next state that we hit. It just happens somewhere in the life cycle of that record. So one is immediately following, one is anywhere in the life cycle. And then we've got another question here. Is there a way to look at business duration versus duration on finding cards? And Jeroen Jeroen, I don't know if you want to come off mute and kind of answer that one out loud to make sure I get it right. It looks like you had a two-part. Yeah.
So we have two types of metrics, if you will. Well, more type of metrics, but we measure on two areas. One is the project level. So there we measure duration from, let's say, the first event until the last event. So if you have a simple process model from new, work in progress, on hold, work in progress to resolved, it measures the entire life cycle. So those are the ones that you see in the breakdowns that you see on top of the screen. And then you have the specific finding card ones. Those are measured from the, let's say the first occurrence. So basically the start condition. So if you specify the first occurrence of new until the last occurrence of, in this case, I wrote work in progress, or sometimes you want to measure, for example, the first occurrence of resolved until the last occurrence of resolved, because that tells you actually how long you lose because tickets get reopened, right? So you can specifically measure that. So that's basically the measures. So if you talk about business duration, for example, do we use calendars? That's something we don't use yet. So you cannot, for example, exclude Saturdays or something.
And then there was one other question out there, and I'm not sure if I understand it correctly. You might, about how do I use sequencing there on the Rome release? This was, do you remember if the ability to stack those rules was available in Rome or no?
Yeah, those are available in Rome as well. Yeah.
No, so
it needs to be a condition 1 needs to be true, and then condition 2 also needs to be true.
Yeah, but also available in Rome. That's good.
Yeah. So there's one question: how do I use the sequence correctly? Yeah, like I said, right? So it's the sequence of occurring. So they need to be more or less an AND clause. So rule 1 needs to be true, rule 2 needs to be true, rule 3 needs to be true, and then it's considered to be valid in the finding definition.
They keep building on top of each other.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions? I just want to quickly, so I know somebody asked earlier, we have made some enhancements in Tokyo. We covered this on the Tokyo updates, but just if this is your first time, I'm going to call out the enhancements specifically in Tokyo for the finding definitions. But before we do that, any other questions we want to touch on?
Yeah, maybe then the question around the or and the and. So there's also an or clause in, for example, the stop condition. So if you have, let's say the start condition is the first occurrence of new, I just say something, and then the stop condition, so stop measuring when it's either, for example, resolved or closed or something like that. So you can have stop conditions, but yeah, all clauses as well. Hopefully that answers the question in the chat. Sorry, Dan.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right. So in Tokyo, so what we were just looking at San Diego, which is where many of you probably are. I don't imagine too many of you have moved to Tokyo yet. But in Tokyo, we've added a number of enhancements, 3 main enhancements to finding rules and definitions that are important to call out. First, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, we've now given you the flexibility to add rules at the project level, not just the process level. So we were in that process configuration right there, and kind of all of those rules that we created, they would be applied for any mining project that was applied on those tables across all the projects. Well, that's not the case anymore in Tokyo. Individual process owners or analysts that are creating their projects, they're going to be able to create their own project level rules that don't get applied across everything, just specifically for the analysis that they're trying to do. We've also added the ability to create custom start and stop conditions when you're doing a mining. So these are for scenarios where maybe you want to analyze an isolated portion of a workflow. So for example, a number of customers came to us and said, hey, we really just want to analyze the workflow up to the resolve state and not go all the way through to the close times. Can we just isolate that part of the workflow? So we added that ability to set up those custom start and stop definitions to keep the numbers. For some customers, they wanted to keep the numbers somewhat in line with some of the KPIs that we're tracking around resolution times. And then finally, we added some more flexibility in terms of how you define the rules to account for some more complex use cases. So you saw when we went in there and I was saying, hey, the state is this, or the assignment group is this. We've added some ability to do some contain. So we had a scenario where a customer wanted to kind of group a set of assignment groups together to match to a finding rule condition. And all of the assignment groups started with, let's say, EMEA or AMS or something like that. So we were able to say, hey, anything that matches these or contains these values, that just gives you a little bit more flexibility there. Oh, here's a screenshot of the project level finding rule. So you'll notice here, I forgot that I put this in, but now you'll see in the related lists at the bottom of the screen, I've got my process finding definitions. Those are the 13 that come out of the box for incident. And then I had this ability to create a project level finding definition. So in total, I'd have 14 finding definitions set up for this specific project that I was mining. So it's just that you inherit the 13 that come at the process level, and then you can add your own for your specific project. Now, some of you are probably saying these look super awesome, but I've got some ideas, but I'd love to have more ideas. One of the things that we've done to help you think about or brainstorm on some ideas for finding cards in your world is we've recently released a new asset out there, something we call the Book of Inefficiencies. And this was driven by us on the product team, but also our Now team, who's been using process optimization internally against a whole slew of processes. Our goal is to kind of have each of the process owners working and using process optimization for something like 90 processes that we have on the platform here at ServiceNow, I think. So as part of that exercise, we found a whole bunch of inefficiencies and we packaged them up into an asset that we posted out there online. If you go to the community, you'll be able to find this on the community forum page underneath common inefficiencies posts that we have out there. And it's also going to be in the deck, and I put the link at the bottom. So if you go to the community and you bring up this article, the link to this asset will be there as well. We've also just released kind of a white paper. That's not kind of, it is a white paper of how we're using in-platform process mining inside of ServiceNow itself. So it walks through a little bit of process mining 101. It talks about kind of how we set up our program here at ServiceNow to kick off and roll out process mining across the organization. And then it details the findings of 5 specific processes or process owners' findings that they had as part of the exercise. So across HR, asset management, I think somebody asked a question about that once before. And then I think incident, request, and change are also the other 3 that are detailed in this white paper. This is the community post that if you're going there and say, I would love to get my hands on that Book of Inefficiencies, find this community post in the forum, and it's attached, or there's a link to that Book of Inefficiencies that's there. All right, I think I'll just open it up. Any questions about finding rules, finding definitions, or anything in general as it pertains to process optimization on the platform? Would say we've completed.
Hello, Dan.
Oh, hey,
You knew I was going to have one, right?
I would be disappointed if you didn't ask a question.
So if I create a process definition for a particular project, can that be copied to another project or shared? Probably can't be shared because it's specific to a table, but can you copy the parameters? So I have to recreate everything from scratch.
That's a good question. So the rules themselves, so like, hey, starting in work in progress, when I hit that little plus and I created that's going to be added to a shareable library. The actual full definition itself, I do not believe becomes available in any way, shape, or form to other folks, but I'll pause. Jeroen, are you still with us?
Yeah, but I didn't get the question.
Okay, perfect. So the question is, let's say I create a project level finding definition.
Right.
Is that going to be available anywhere else to other, let's say, analysts or process owners, or is it the definition that where?
Yeah. So so if you're happy with it, that you would like to save it in your library, right? No, that's not what we have right now.
Yeah, not today. But the actual, so the rule inside of the finding definition, like where I say, hey, start at work in progress, that's available across all projects, just not the definition itself, correct?
Right, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got you. That helpful?
Sure.
Perfect.
Because I'm just thinking about, when you spend a lot of time building a pretty complex model, right? And then you maybe want to replicate what you did for incident, maybe to monitor the change process or the problem process. And some of the tables are shared, right? And status indicators are shared. You may not want to have to recreate everything from scratch, so some level of duplication or copying, pasting of something of some sorts would certainly be helpful when you're dealing with that.
That's good feedback. That's good feedback. That's something. The good news is Jeroen is my counterpart on the product management side, and he manages and handles the roadmap. So it's good.
I'll put it on.
Consider it added.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other questions? I see a question here. Just the when will the deck be available? Give me like probably an hour. I'll get the recording in my inbox. I will then quickly edit the recording, and I will post it. It should be posted by the end of today, I say, is the safest. The recording as well as the deck will be posted to the community forum, the process optimization community forum. Anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, one thing to add then is,
Yeah.
not sure if you already covered it in the Tokyo one, but we got often a question like, can we provide some contextual information? Like, while it was assigned to my team, this and this happened, for example. When it was assigned to my team, did we have, for example, priority ones, or was it already degraded, or did we have an SLA breach? Did it happen while it was assigned to my team? Those type of analysis can be done also in Tokyo. So you can put context to your start condition. So a little bit more detailed. So not only start condition should be my team, but start condition should be my team, and this should happen.
That's good. Yeah,
that's an interesting one. And yes, right.
No, I said we talked a little bit of it, but not that then in the Tokyo, but not at that level of depth for sure. That's the contextual or conditions.
Yeah, so especially for team, it's handy, right? Because you're managing your own teams. That's the first condition, and then secondly, if a particular event happens, give me those. And in Tokyo, we have the multi-dimensional mining. So in one graph, you can, visualize and correlate, for example, requested items with SE task. And what you can do then, create a rule, for example, give me all the requested items where the tasks are still, for example, waiting for approval or those type of things for longer than a particular time. So that means that you know which SC task, an SC task means service catalog task, is screwing you up, and also where in the process of the SC task. And that's also available in Tokyo.
Cool. I just, before we move on to just wrapping up, I'm curious, well, two things. Curious, after seeing kind of what we could do with finding rules, does anybody have any thoughts on specific questions that they're interested in going back and creating a finding rule for? Now that they know that they can do this?
I might be curious to know what the capabilities are, Dan, that, you're looking a lot of the state changes in the process flow, but there might also be things introduced that cause issues, like perhaps the wrong CIs are being associated to an incident ticket. And that's a recurring activity. So I don't know if that level of granularity goes there.
It's so, and Jeroen, correct me if I misstate something here today, but today that would be somewhat challenging, but in the Utah release Safe Harbor, we're adding a capability. What's the word for that capability?
Yeah, we're still talking about it.
Okay, so we're enhancing it. I'll just say simply, we're adding an enhancement to this solution, so you don't need to have the data inside of the activity records to apply a finding rule for it. It's probably the simplest way to say it. So just to make it a little bit more robust today. I think that would be a little bit of a challenge at the CI level.
Today it requires that you create a CI level as activity definition. So you definitely can do it, but your graph,
your map would get scary.
Yeah, your map will be a massive, it will be insanely large. So first of all, you can solve the use case. So if you have this question, you can just create a model based on CI and state as your activity definitions and create your finding rule. So you'll have the answer. Now you don't want to create always a new project for it, right? You want to do it in one. Therefore, we introduce, then we call it internally attributes of interest, but attributes are activity definitions that you don't want to see on your graph, but you would like to consider for the finding definitions. And those are typically maybe assigned to CI, those type of things, right?
Right.
Especially extremely large volumes, because it makes the graph impossible to read, but it gives you extremely handy insights, right? So that's why we come up with them.
All right. So here's just one more question. I'd be interested in creating a finding rule to determine which incident records sit with a specific team for X amount of time before being looked at, and then just reassign instead of being resolved. I believe that's something that we can do today, Quentin. Because we can use the combination of the duration or those time constraints, as well as the kind of what the next group is as the follow-up step. So pretty sure we can do that one today. Just to wrap up, and perhaps maybe I'll create a little example and put that on the community for that one, Quentin, for you. All right, just wrapping up, for those that are first timers and have not actually started playing around, what you do next is you go out there, and on the Now Learning site, there's a Process Optimization Essentials course. It's a self-paced, on-demand training that takes about 90 minutes to go through. Go through that training. Then you have the ability to activate the Process Optimization plugin on any subprod instance, and mine up to 4,000 records. If you will. And so on your subprod, you want to go out there, you want to turn on process optimization, then turn on the process optimization content pack, turn those two things on, and just try it out. Mine some records for your incident process. Some other resources that are out there for you. One, they got the community forum. There is a specific process optimization community forum. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the party fast enough. And the form is not listed off the main page list of forms. You actually have to search for it to find it, but it's out there. That page, if you got any questions, ideas, things that you want to talk about on future sessions, please just go out there, post them on the community. Jeroen, myself, and others, we check it every single day to make sure that we're answering questions. So please post there. There's an FAQ out there on that site that basically links to all of the content that we've ever posted publicly. So if you've got a question and you're saying, hey, I wish there was a recording for this, it might be out there. Just check that community FAQ. We talked about the essentials. And on that, from that FAQ, you can actually get to, we've got a recorded demo of process optimization out there. So if you've got others in your organization that are potentially interested or might be interested in the capability solution and you want them to see it in action, there's a 10 to 15 minute demo recorded that we put out there on the community site as well that you can share with them. Last bit, we did a bunch of questions, just kind of talking about what's coming up next. The next session in 2 weeks, we're going to spend a little bit of time on like just kind of how do we operationalize a process mining program in the organization. So it's one thing to mine some data and get some insights, but then you need to act on them, and you want to make it part of your continual improvement process inside of your organization. So we'll just share some things that we've learned from our rollout of process optimization here at ServiceNow, as well as kind of some of the other customers who have started going down this road. We've kind of gathered some things, we'll present some ideas, but super interested in hearing from all of you in terms of kind of how you're approaching process mining at your organization and kind of what your process looks like internally and some of the things that you've done, so we can all learn together to kind of make the successful process mining a successful program in our organizations. Followed up after that session, we'll look at kind of the integration between workforce optimization and process optimization. And then the session after that that we've got scheduled is, Jeroen mentioned recently that in Tokyo, we've released this ability to do multi-dimensional mining, which is kind of visualizing on a single process map interconnected processes, like this catalog request to the catalog item to the tasks underneath it, or an HR onboarding process. Those create very powerful maps. But navigating them and working with them and analyzing becomes a little bit more involved. So we want to make sure we spend some time talking about how do you interpret those interconnected process maps. With that, last bit, anybody have any additional questions before we close out the session today? No? If not, look forward to seeing you guys on the community site. And if I don't see you out on the community forum for process optimization, I look forward to you seeing it in a couple of weeks. Thanks for your time today, everyone.